Nine are mid. Says, when making something, do you start with the hard part or the easy part? I paint figurines, and I sometimes wonder if I should do the piece that will be hard first to get it done or the easy part to gain confidence. In general, top line of this is if it's equivalent, let's say I'm looking at a hard thing and an easy thing, if neither needs to be prioritized for the build, and it's an open question as to which I tackle, I always tackle the hard one first. I'm a big believer in doing the hard part early. And that's born out of working in film, working on the show, working on Mythbusters. And when you are working in special effects, you're working with parameters that may change radically depending on the conditions, the director, the weather, the crew, whatever. And you need to be ready to lop chunks off of your build or what you're delivering because of the needs of production. And in order to do that, you need to know what is the highest priority. And so it's actually, wait, there's another question that sort of drifts into this. And let me just see. Okay. Yeah, it's a separate question, but so I like to do the hard part first because the hard part is usually the one with an unknown amount of time attached to it. And if I get that out of the way, the easy parts, those are easy to figure out how much time that's going to take. So I do the hard part first, one, because I like getting it out of the way, but two, because it answers a lot of mission critical questions about the build early rather than late. You don't want to be confronting those questions late. At the same time, I have totally had builds where there's like some fun part of the build and I save those fun parts sometimes for a moment when I get brought low by a mistake. There's definitely points in a build where it's like, well, I was just having it. I was wiring something that's behind me here, and I had set up a bunch of jumpers. And I needed 40 jumpers, and I'd set them all up, and I went to put in the first one, and it was not long enough, which meant that all the wires I'd cut for all these 40 jumpers needed to be tossed and made longer. Luckily, I had just enough wire to do it, but like those kind of, I just did something, I just spent a lot of time doing something, and I did it wrong, and now I got to do it again. That really gets to me. I get really emotional about that sort of going back over territory I've already gone over. For myself, that frame, which everyone who makes anything deals with, I try, when I am in my right mind, I try and approach it with it like, okay, this is what's happening. I screwed it up, I got to do it again. But man, I can get so salty about it. I remember this one time on the show, I had recorded, I had done a full afternoon of small pieces to camera, like 10 of them. And there was a problem with the sound transmitter and none of my audio went to the camera. And I had to basically go back through 10 pieces to camera and redo each one. Oh my God, I was so salty about it. And the worst part, every single take, the second take was better than the first take. I just was like, I don't want anyone to notice this because I don't want to work that hard. In general, the hard part first, but if there's a really easy, fun part, I'll save that in case and until. The other question that was around this comes from Kieran Props, and it's a lovely question. They say they've been making props and costumes for 10 years, and they got started through cosplay, went to college for theater tech, and they're realizing now that their work pales in comparison to that of seasoned professionals. I know that is a tough pill to swallow. And they continue. I feel like I was oblivious to this for a long time because my work has always been over the top enough to garner compliments and my portfolio has gotten me jobs. But now that I'm actually working in a professional setting, I make so many stupid, sloppy mistakes. And for too long, He says, I've been throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks rather than being methodical and precise. How do I convince my brain to slow down and focus on improving my technical skill and attention to detail? All right. I read this last night and I made some notes. First and foremost, that ability to see that the work that you got a lot of attention for and you got the job with is not as good as the professional level work now that you've experienced it. I love those eyes. They sting. They certainly sting, because I absolutely had the same thing. I had stuff I built early on that got a lot of attention, and now I look at it and be like, man, what a amateur night job that is. But even though that stings, it's progress. It's your brain having better eyes to see the reality of a thing. So I made a sculpture that's hanging over my front door. It's welded to above my front door, but it's a bird, and it's a bird that I welded. And I welded it, it's very rudimentary, just rod steel, like 5/16 a mild steel rod welded into a bird shape. But the wings are an entire feather duster that I hot glued to the steel. And I love this piece. I love what it looks like. It sat on the head of a head that I made. And now I look at it and the wings are garbage. They are gestural. They communicate wings just great. But now that I've been researching wings for a while and I've been building stuff for 3 more decades than back then, I can see the amateur night like fever dream. And I respect that. But again, like getting those eyes, even though it stings, it is real progress in your ability to see your own work clearly. But you specifically asked about how to convince your brain to slow down and focus. First and foremost, I make lists. I make tons and tons of lists, and I have since the beginning of my professional life. I remember specifically starting a small theater company with some friends in 1991 to do theater tech, like freelance theater tech. And I had to build a whole bunch of props for a show. And it was so much information. I still think I have this list somewhere in my collection. I made this extensive list of like 200 line items. And lists do a few things. First and foremost, they get something out of my brain and on paper, which is really important. It means that it's no longer going to get lost. But secondly, lists help me see the totality of a thing and what is important about it. Third, they allow me to see enough. Usually making a list is immediately followed by making a second list. It's more refined than the first. The first one is just all the thoughts in my head, unseparated, just dumping down. And the second list is, oh, I see, here's 2 categories there, here's another category here. Oh, these 3 are part of this other category. And it helps give form to the build. I've said this in the past. This is really true for me as a maker. In the beginning, I'm making stuff, I'm like looking at a drawing and I'm manipulating material and I'm trying to get close to the drawing and I'm going back and forth, and eventually through work and effort, I get there. Now, I look at something and I think about ways to make it, and I sit there and I gestate and meditate on different work techniques. And so much of that problem solving that I would have done in my 20s with the object, I do now in my 50s in my head. And that is part of attempting to put the whole object into my body. It is one of the lovely, I'm sure some of you have nerdy friends who could look at a Stormtrooper helmet and tell you not only what movie is it from, but what part of what movie it's from, and maybe which person made it. These are folks who, they can do this because the entirety of the sort of history of Stormtrooper helmets is in their head, it's in their body. So to me, the list, I think one of the terms for this is embodied knowledge. And I think for me, lists end up being an extension of my embodied knowledge until the whole thing gets inside. Sometimes I go back and look at my lists hundreds of times, and a good portion of the time, writing it down once is all that I needed, and I never go back and look at that list again. How do you convince your brain to slow down and focus on improving your technical skill and attention to detail? For context, they say, Kieran Probst, I have ADHD. So the way that film worked with my brain is that in film, as I was just saying in the previous answer, the parameters could change on a dime. And you need to know not just how to, let's say, when I say parameters change on a dime, let's say you built a prop and you bring it out and somebody on the crew like falls on it and breaks it. You then have to fix that prop, but you plausibly have a limited amount of time and you might not be able to fix everything that's necessary on that prop. So what you need to know as a prop person is what is the most high priority aspect of this prop that needs to be delivered for camera, and what are the things that I don't have to worry about. And so for me, part of my professional life has always been imbibing, absorbing, and taking in more and more information about the biggest possible picture I can have access to so I understand what the priorities are. And the priority, knowing the priorities of a thing, like I only have to see this thing from camera from this side. I got asked to build one that was 360, but now we're on set and I can see we're only gonna ever see it from this side. So if somebody dents it here, I don't have to fix that. Those are the kind of things that, like, once you have the whole job in your body, you will know instantly. And if you wonder what this is like, I think everyone has worked with supervisors who have no idea what the hell is going on. And everyone has also worked with supervisors who understood exactly everything that was going on. And the difference is really the ones who understand what's really going on have internalized the real structure of what is happening. I think, I don't have okay, so regarding like knowing what the priority is, when Bobby Fingers called up and asked me to participate in his video and it turned out to be involving the slow-mo guys, I was in 100%, hook, line, and sinker right away. No worries. And I talked about this before on the live streams, I was confronted with the fact that they were asking me to do something semi-dangerous, to put a projectile in a barrel and fire that projectile out at a speed that would hurt or harm. And to do this safely, repeatably, reliably, under specific conditions that they were asking for. And I was cognizant that I had used to have a whole crew that helped me embody that knowledge and understand what was important. And I had to sort of do that all myself. So on the day, I arrived down in Texas. I go out to the location with everybody. And we're setting up, and I'm nervous. I'm totally nervous. There's a lot to get done today, and there's a lot to deliver. But I'm also cognizant that the main thing I need is for this bird to leave that barrel at a specific speed. And as long as those two things happen, it leaves the barrel and the speed is reasonable, everything else is fungible. Like, that is the most mission critical thing. And knowing that, walking on set and knowing what is the mission critical thing, that's what helps me deal with my nervousness, but also like figure out how to proceed. And so you know, if you watch that video, it really was astounding because it came out, we wanted 75 miles an hour. I think it came out at like 72 miles an hour, something like that. And what you really witness in me is a complete relief because the rest of this day is not going to be easy, but it's going to be straightforward. And that is a kind of easy. It's going to be straightforward because I know that the most important thing, which is the shot of the bird coming out and being able to hit a target, those are the most important things for this shoot. If nothing else happens today, that footage has to make it into Bobby's video and Slow-Mo Guy's video and my video. I see that and I'm like, great, we are straightforward. I know I've wandered really far afield from your question. But as someone who also has ADHD, I found that the kind of prioritizing in the film industry spoke to me and allowed me to concentrate in a way that was really beneficial. It's not for everyone. Like, you know, I think everyone finds the career that dovetails with their pathologies, as it were. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I wanted to briefly mention that you could become a tested member. I know everybody is competing for you to become a member of their thing. What I want to express to you is that the tested membership has become such an important part of the tested family. We get tremendous feedback from the tested members, and they expand the stories that we can tell and the things that we have access to. And you can become a part of it right now by clicking on the link below. See you in the chat.